Back at it again, everybody. It was good with you, man. On this nice, glorious Sunday here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, man. 43 degrees outside. It's 2:32. March 1st, 2026. So, coming at you live and direct once again. With another video. Really not major though. Just came from church, in Glacier. I had a good time, man, and listened to the word. The word was basically talking about getting your house in order, keeping your house in order, understanding the headship, understanding, your place in the household, understanding where you, where you are in the household, understanding where the wife is, understanding where the children is, and just understanding where you at in God first, because, that's how a household can run. A household can run, in good faith and good solid ground, if it's rooted into the word of Christ, into the things of Christ, though. So it hit home for me a little bit, definitely a lot, because, being divorced and all that and sleeping in the car is like, I really ain't got a home, so, the only home I got is basically like, just my car, That's what I've been doing, my mobile home, though. So, so it definitely hit home. And then, listen to the word today. It also helped me reflect, help me reflect back on, when I was in the home and when I was with my children, when I was married in the home, and, being the head of household and trying to figure out what all that was. It was definitely hitting though. So, it was definitely, hitting home. It was definitely hitting the heart and really, convicting me that, I could have definitely, did much better though. Could have definitely did way much better, being the head of household though. So, it is what it is. But, like I said, man, you live and you learn, man. And, a lot of us out there, dealt with that situation before. We all dealt with that situation when, when we didn't feel like the head of household, when we didn't feel respected, when we was feeling disrespected, when our kids was in, total disarray, when, the relationship between the wife, between the spouse, between the fiance was all, of course, wasn't on track though. So, those who dealt with that before, man, like, you guys can relate. And, but like I said, it was definitely hitting home. Just got done with the work week today, so did the 11 to 7, Tuesday to Saturday. Wasn't as tired though, but definitely tired. I probably only got like maybe like 4 hours of sleep the whole week, this past week though. So, with both jobs, but, either way, I still just continue to strive and still try to put up some content, to keep you guys encouraged as well. Male and female, but mainly men though. So, I believe that anybody could find a little something, out of these, videos though. And, yeah, so, it was definitely tough. It was definitely a challenging work week though, definitely challenging though, but, we get through it. I still didn't hear anything on the place though, still a glitch in the system, but, the young lady said that she'll let me know what's going on still. So still praying for that, those who's watching, those who support me, man, I appreciate it. Just keep that in prayer, man. Like, still just striving though. And, and like I said though, if that place isn't just specifically for me, then, then I gotta, look elsewhere and do something else though. But, just right now, I'm just trusting God though, with that situation. I know there's more places out there. I know a lot of people saying, Buddy, man, Myron, you know what I mean? Like, Wiz, like, look for other spots. And it's like, I am though, but, I don't want to put, like I said, 2 feet ahead of one and, just find myself in a tough situation though. So, it definitely is a process, but, I'm hanging in there, definitely hanging in there. Still looking good, smelling good as usual. Nothing major though. Chilling at Sheets, man. And, I got something to eat. And, probably going to chill at the cigar lounge for a little bit, maybe, if I could. But, if not, it's all well and good. I'm meeting all my children at, at bowling though. So I'm going to take them out at bowling, take them to bowling though at like around 4:30. So I'm gonna meet my children there and you know, continue to you know, tackle on this winning streak that I've been having with my family, with my children for like the last 16 years though. So I have not been beaten at all. Have not been beaten at all. For the last 16 and a half, 17 years, I have not been beaten. None of my children has been able to beat me. None of, you know, my ex-wife wasn't able to beat me. Nobody's able to beat me though. So, you know, we'll see. You know, maybe one of my children get lucky today, but you know, my goal is to come out there, compete and win. So, you know, definitely looking forward to that though. And, you know, yeah, so, you know, don't want to hold you guys too long. You know, just want to get a quick video in. You know, like I said, it's a glorious day today, man. 43 degrees, you know, on a Sunday here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Like I said, March 1st, 2026, 2:38 right now, man. Going on 6 minutes in the video though, so you know, just giving you guys a little update with that though, with the crib and everything else. You know, yeah, you know, and you know, just taking it from there, you know, though. So, you know, just still striving, like I said, still striving, still working, still trying to put cash to the side, and you know, still trying to figure out how to be a better man, you know, just in general though, you know. So, you know, whether if it's the attitude, whether if it's my worrying, whether if it's anxiety, anxiousness, generosity. That's one of the things that we did learn today, you know, today at church is how many of us is being generous, how many of us is showing generosity to others, how many of us is being patient and, you know, and not being so loose, so much of a loose cannon with everybody else though. So, you know, God is definitely dealing with me. You know, I went up and got prayer today. You know, like I said, even though I'm not the head of household in the household, I'm the head of household in my car, but you know, I'm still a father. You know, I'm still a father though, so, you know, I still gotta, you know, still gotta be there for my children. You know, still gotta be a mentor to them. Still gotta be a role model, and you know, still gotta show them and teach them and encourage them as much as I can. You know, a lot though. So, you know, that definitely really hit home. You know what I mean, today though. So on all aspects, good, bad, and ugly though. So, you know, I was really trying to fight it, but I did go up there and get prayer, you know, today. You know, my man Eli prayed for me too, man. You know, powerful brother in Christ though, man. Appreciate it though. And you know, yeah, man. So, you know, just still continue to keep on striving, man. Still continue to, you know, do what's right, man. Still continue to, you know, just be on point and just trying to work and still just trying to strive and, you know, and just seeing what's going on with, you know, with the place though. So, you know, like I said, whether if it's you know, whether if it's over there where I applied at, or, you know, and even if it's not, then, you know, God's still in control though. So, you know, we still gonna you know, we still gonna make a way out of no way though. So, you know, that's important. And you know, that's still, you know, that's still something that, you know, as children of God, man, as men of God, that's what we just gotta hold on to. We just gotta hold on to the word and God's promises though. So, you know, I'm gonna get to it, you know, 3-minute devotion, you know, for men. And I'm gonna read the passage though, you know, and I'm just gonna get to it though. Like I said, I don't, you know, want to keep you guys too long, but, you know, it is a nice day. I ain't really want to do nothing. Really didn't want to make a video at night, you know, so I just want to share a little, you know, shed a little bit of light though, you know, a little bit of light. You know, I'm chilling over here at Sheets though, like I said though. And, you know, got something to eat and, you know, just chilling for a little bit too. It's time to link up with all the children. But 3-minute devotions, man. The title was Faith When It Really Counts. Do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. That's Numbers 14:9. Joshua and Caleb were the only 2 men over 40 years old who were allowed to enter the promised land. After 40 years in the wilderness, these men faced a monumental task of taking the land God had promised to the Israelites. Their faith in God was an all-encompassing as if their lives depended on a kind of faith. Why? Because their lives actually did depend on God's promise. If Joshua was to lead Israel to the land, he would have filled God's presence on a moment-by-moment basis and step out in faith, trusting that God would come through for him. Joshua's job as the leader of Israel was to encourage the people to attack fortified cities in the face of overwhelming odds. Through 40 years, his confidence in God's strong arm had not wavered, and God rewarded his faith. Let Joshua's story of determined, consistent belief encourage you today. God, please help me have faith and encourage of Joshua to believe that you're with me and will keep all your promises. In Jesus' name I pray. Self-explanatory as usual, over 40 years old. I'm 42. I know I said in the last video I was 43, but I'll be 43. I'll be 43, but I'm currently 42 though. So, but you think about that. You think about that. The Israelites was going around, the mountain for 40 years, man, and that was tough. They were just going around and going around and going around, trying to figure out what was going on. Trying to figure out their place in life, their place in God, and they were just trying to figure it out though. So, but no matter what, like, God had them. God had them though. God definitely had them, and he made sure that they had stuff on their feet. Still made sure that they had food, even though they was cursing and cursing and cursing. Like, he still made sure that he had them though. And sometimes we gotta think about that. Sometimes we just gotta go back to to the basics and like the original stories that was going on in the Bible though. We got all these history books out here, but to be honest, like, the best history book is the Bible though. Whether if you don't believe it or not, like, it's still history though. So read it and understand it, because everything that happened then, it comes back and it circles right back around again. And that's why we got the Bible. That's why we read these type of passages, because even though things is very, very different from back then, even though the days is different, even though nights is different, even though the commerce and how the world is going is very, very different from back then. But that's why we read the word. That's why we go back to the Bible, so we can see what was happening then, so we can understand it now. And once we do that though, it will things will be a little bit more easier to comprehend and to navigate what is going on now. And that's why you got to have faith. With this situation, my situation is it's all faith. Like, it's faith. Like, my faith has been, I had no other alternative but to build up my faith and build up my trust in God during these storms. Being divorced and sleeping in the car and all this other stuff, and once again still trying to navigate the world and jobs, and still trying to find time for myself, still trying to be there for my children, still try to perform at work, still try to trust the Lord in each storm and trial and tribulations as much as I possibly can. And it's those times when you feel like you at rock bottom. It's those times when you feel like that you're against a rock in a hard place. It's those times when you feel like that you just in the darkness and there's nothing else that is possibly going on that you can see the light. It's those times that you really got to have the faith though. But the good thing about it though, is about the word of God though, man, is that he gives us the word, like, he gives us instructions though. And most of the time in our lives, we don't have to wait till we really, 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 really hit rock bottom though. Some of that, most of that, if not all of that, could have possibly been avoided if we would have just trust and just have faith in God and the word when it really counts, excuse me. So sometimes we, sometimes, like it says right here, like, we rebel against the Lord though, like, we rebel, and being a rebel is just doing what you want to do. Like I said, you can rebel with your attitude. You can rebel with, listening to the word in church and be like, man, I ain't trying to hear all that. Like, you can rebel against rules and regulations, at work. You can rebel against, the rules and regulations out here as a citizen while you're driving and operating the vehicle though. So you can rebel against, your marriage, your relationships, anything though. And, all of that, all of that comes under Lord, under that, all of that comes under God, all of that comes up under the Lord, so, that's why it's important, to make sure that our houses is on point. So when we do come out here in society, and when we do come out here in the world, and when we do get on our jobs, and then when we work and try to get that paycheck, like, it's just important that we understand that God gave it to us though. Whether if we believe it or we don't, like, God gave it to us, but he can also take it away if we rebelling. So we don't want to rebel. We don't want to rebel against God and just in life, we don't. I know he gives us grace and mercy. He definitely gives me a lot of grace and mercy. and just as well as he does, you know, with everyone else out here under the sound of my voice. But sometimes we don't, most of the time, all the time, you know, we don't want to take that grace and mercy for granted though. So, you know, we don't want to rebel, you know, we don't want to rebel against God though, you know, even if, you know, even in our faith will be trusting, you know, like I said, just because you know, it's already been like a few weeks now, maybe like 4 weeks, and then I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with the place though, you know. And like I said in the last video, I could be rebelling, I could be, you know, being rebellious, I could be cussing everybody out, man. I could be cussing myself out, I could be out here just going wild, you know, like, you know, where it's going wild. But you know, you can't, because, you know, whatever's going on, like, you know, I got to give that to God though, because it's not my fault. You know, I did everything that I possibly can do. You know, it's not the office's fault that they trying to, you know, look out for me and trying to handle situations. You know, they doing what they need to do on their behalf. So, you know, you just got to trust God with it though. And, you know, sometimes, man, a lot of times when I'm with my children, like, you know, I always say things like, you know, like to quote the movie Lion King, you know, like, if you roll with me, if you roll with their old dad, you'll never go hungry again. You know, and sometimes that could be like for anything though, you know, just decisions, just playing around, you know, just with food, just with anything though. And you know, but Joshua and Caleb, man, like, you know, they were the only 2 men over 40 years old who were allowed to enter the promised land. You know, and when I'm usually playing around and you know, teasing my children, I always say, listen, man, you roll with me, like I said, you never go hungry again. Or, you know, you roll with me, I'm gonna help you get to the promised land. You know, I'm gonna help you get to the promised land filled with milk and honey. You know, so sometimes, you know, sometimes I'm usually quoting that little piece, you know, a little piece by piece and bit by bit. You know, and like I said, me being 42, you know, for 40 years, no question about it though. When I look at it now, when I look back and when I look at it now, where I'm at right now, 40 years, you know, 40 years of my life, I was going around a mountain just like the Israelites. I was going around in the mountain with my attitude, with relationships, with, you know, being a parent, with life, with stress, with you know, growing up, with being abused, with, you know, dealing with alcohol, drugs here and there, you know, the streets, you know, whether if I'm worthy or not, whether if I am worthy, you know, whether somebody loves me, whether if they don't love me, dealing with heartache, pain, bitterness, unforgiveness, sexual sin, sexual immortality, everything, you know, everything that you could possibly think of, because we're all human, you know, we're all human though. So, you know, looking back at it, like 40 years, you know, 40 years I was dealing with all that though, and just trying to figure it out, But, you know, when I look at it now, when I read like Joshua and Caleb, man, it was 40 years old, and, you know, they was the only ones allowed. So that, you know, so we're talking about men amongst men before them, you know, 40, 50, 60 decades, centuries, you know, ahead of them. You know, they was the only ones at that age to go to the promised land. You know, Moses didn't go in, you know, but Caleb and Joshua did though. Like, they went in the promised land. So, you know, man, like, you know, sometimes, man, like, we definitely going around that mountain and we trying to put our feet on solid ground, and it's rough and it's tough. I say that all the time, but, you know, they always say like a man really reaches his peak about, you know, 40 years old, 45. You know, that's just when we reach our peak. We reach our vitality. We reach our, you know, what we want in life, what we already doing, what we accomplished. It's that time to really, you know, around 40 years old, at least what I did though. And that's, I'm going by experience as well, you know, and especially just having faith in God though. But, you know, that's just when you really start figuring out, you know, and, you know, yeah, so to look back and see that, you know, Joshua and Caleb was the only men over 40 years old who were allowed to enter the promised land. After 40 years in the wilderness, these men faced monumental tasks of taking the land God had promised to the Israelites. So they not only made it though, but, you know, so now they're trying to help everybody else get acclimated. Now they're trying to help all the Israelites, you know, get acclimated. You know, now they're trying to, you know, still prove to them and let them know like God was with y'all. Like God was with y'all though. And just because y'all made it through, just because y'all came through the promised land, now it's an awesome task. Y'all got to hold this down. Just like when we get married, just like in our relationships, just like with our households, man, we got to hold it down. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, that's basically what, you know, that's basically what that's saying. It's a monumental task. What is a monument? Like, we look at the Lincoln Memorial, Like, we look at statues, we look at the Statue of Liberty. You know, there's a little statue here, you know, here in Pennsylvania off the Susquehanna River when you're going towards the Dauphin area. It's called Lady Liberty. It's maybe like, you know, 15, 16, maybe like 20 feet though. You know, nothing, you know, skyrocketing though, but you know, for us here in PA, like, it's a dope sight. It's a dope sight to really see, you know, when you driving up the river and, you know, you're really looking to the right or to the left. So, you know, next time you guys is driving through, you know, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, whatever, going to the Carlisle area or whatever, like, you know, State College area, you know, take a look over there, man. It's, you know, Lady Liberty though. So, but that's a task, you know, that's a task, you know, that's a task of holding down that land. You know, we're talking about farming, we're talking about housing, we're talking about attitudes, we're talking about, you know, people's sin, we're talking about people still having unbelief and not trusting in Christ. You know, so that's a monumental task that these two young men, you know, was up against, to still try to teach and lead the people. You know, so, you know, that's important. But, you know, they had to do it by what? It says right here, you know, their faith in God was an all-encompassing, as if their lives depended on it kind of faith. Which means, like, you know, it was so encompassing that their task was a monumental task that hit them, that if somebody else failed, or if somebody was straying away, or if somebody else really didn't understand what was going on or what God was trying to do, and they were straying away, they felt that. They felt like they did not do their job. You know, they felt like, man, like, you know, they came up short. You know, so you imagine what Caleb and Joshua was thinking, like, man, like, I'm preaching. I'm trying to teach the people, man, and they still not getting it. Just like how Moses went, you know, on the mountain, though, when he went up there and he prayed, man, he's like, yo, man, people just still not getting it, though. I gave them the commandments, though. I gave them, like, I led them through the Spirit and through the glory of God, though, man. Like, I let them know, like, I even, you know, God even protected them going through the Red Sea. You know, so, and he's like, yo, God, man, God, yo, what is going on, man? What did I do? Like, did I fail? Did I fail so much? Like, what am I missing? You know, so, you know, with them, you know, with Joshua and Caleb, man, like, that was, you know, that was huge, man. They really took that serious. You know, it's just like, you know, our pastors and our overseers of our lives, you know, just like us being parents. You know, sometimes, or a lot of times, when our children stray away for whatever reason, and, you know, they fail, and it's like all the teaching we've been showing them, all the teaching we've been telling them, all the teaching we've been encouraging them to do right, and then they go off and they stray and they get caught up in something stupid, and now now as parents, though, we're in our brains like, yo, what did I do wrong? We're looking at our spouses, we're looking at, you know, our fiancés, we're looking at, you know, the mother and the fathers of our children, like, yo, where do we go wrong? Like, where did we go wrong? Where did we go wrong? So that's basically what that means. Like, you know, they had that depend on that kind of faith. Like, you know, it was them. Like, it was them inside somebody else. It was them. You know, they wanted, like, they probably wanted to jump in somebody's body so much so they can just help the person just understand, like, they in the promised land, though. Like, they in the promised land of milk and honey, though. So, you know, like, I feel you guys. Like, I feel you, man. But, you know, you guys got to get it together, though. So, you know, that's what that means. And why? It says right here, you know, why? Because their lives actually did depend on God's promises. If Joshua was to lead Israel into the land, he would have had to feel God's presence on a moment by moment basis and step out in faith, trusting that God will come through for him. So when people was acting up, man, when people was going astray, when people was doing this and doing that, he still had to go to God and say, God, man, yo, once again, I did everything I did. I did everything I could all the way up to this particular point. Like they in the promised land. Like they cool. And even though you still kept them, for 40 years, though, for 40 years, all that, even though you still kept them, like, yo, they still ain't getting it. You know what I mean? Like, they just is not getting it, though. So God, like, you just what have I done? You know, so they basically, once again, like, taking on their struggles, and they taking on their pain, and they taking on their feelings and everything else in between those. So, you know, But they still had to trust God, though. You know, they still had to trust God. That's the main thing. You still got to trust God, no matter what is really going on. No matter if your children, if the spouse, if the fiancés, if the people at work, your bosses, the one that's driving, that's getting ready to cut you off on, like, you still got to go to God, though, and you still got to keep God's promises, because, you know, you got to stay close to Him. You got to stay close to God, and especially as men, you know, being the head of household. That's where we get our riches from. You know, that's where we get our trust, and that's where we get our promises, and that's where we get our revelation from. We get that from God first. You know, we got to submit ourselves to God, and we got to submit ourselves to Christ. You know, so, you know, that's where we get that from. And like it says right here, Joshua's job as the leader of Israel was to encourage the people to attack fortified cities in the face of overwhelming odds. Through 40 years, his confidence in God's strong arm had not wavered. You know, he had attacked cities. You know, he was chosen. He was chosen. He was chosen. He was called, both of them, to attack cities, man, to maintain God's plan and God's word. You know, and no matter if he got tired, no matter if it seems like people was just dropping like flies, you know, for, you know, on his end, under his care, yo, he still had to have a strong arm. He had to have a strong arm. If he didn't have it physically, he still had to find that spiritually. And like I said before in the last video, mentally as well, because that's where it starts, in the mind, in the brain right here, though. So to really be strong, you know, he had to really go to God, though. He had to really trust God's promise that he was able to do, and, you know, he was able to do and conquer what he was set out to do. You know, so out there in the promised land, and you know, the milk and honey, man, trying to keep these people on point, though. So, you know, the Israelites, but and he didn't waver. You know, he didn't give up. That's what it means. He didn't give up. He didn't give up. He probably swayed a little bit, side to side. He probably, you know, he probably did throw his hands up. You know, who knows? He probably was like, you know what, I can't do it. He probably did. You know what? He probably did, though. I know for me, I know we all do, and I know I did before. But after a while, I was like I said before, you can't stay there. You can't stay there. So you can't waver. You got to stay firm, man. You got to stay firm. You got to stay firm. You got to stay firm. You got to stay firm and solid, on solid ground. And then once God propels you, so then you'll be more than capable, more able to hold that down. And then so it says right here, you know, let Joshua's story of determined, consistent belief encourage you today. You know, Joshua and Caleb, man, like, once again, they had to lead the people. You know, that's why they was called. They was 40 years old, though. 40 years old. You know, 40 years old. It's a reason why I named my youngest son Mylan. His middle name is Joshua. And that's why. You know, I kind of, you know, I looked at my son and I prayed about it. My youngest son, he's 11, you know, going to be 12. I looked at him as being a Joshua, you know, in the Bible. Somebody who's going to speak up for his generation. Somebody who's going to speak for the ones who's getting bullied. Somebody who's going to speak for the ones who feel depressed and feeling that anxiety, and the ones who's, you know, feeling oppressed, you know. And, you know, that's why the middle name Joshua was cool for him. Mylan Joshua Brooks, you know. So he does have an awesome responsibility, an awesome task ahead of him, you know, as he continue to mature and you know, find himself in Christ, and, you know, get older, and you know, get into more things of God as he's understanding it. Because, you know, we all know, like, this life right now, man, for you know, for the young ones, like, you know, it's tough, man. It's ratchet, man. You know, it's off the chain. It's off the chain, though. So you know, that's one of the reasons why, like I said, like, I named him Joshua, because that's an awesome responsibility for him. And I think that he's going to rise up, and he's going to be out here, and he's going to be preaching, man. He's going to help getting people to where they need to be, and you know, and being strong about it and trusting Christ about it as well. So he won't come out here and he won't get hurt as well. So he won't feel offended. And you know, yo, so yeah, you know, I mean, that's you know, like I said, just a little snippet today, man. You know, females, man, boys and girls, children of all ages, man. Just once again, just want to encourage you guys. You know, just like I'm trying to transition, you know, from this car, and try to transition to another place. That's another land. You know, that's for me. You know, that's a promised land. But, you know, once I get to that point, I can't waver. You know, I'm gonna have to hold it down. I'm gonna have to still make sure that I'm doing what I got to do to maintain the place. I'm gonna still have to make sure that I'm being a parent, and, you know, when my children is over, still praying with them, and still, you know, sharing the word with them, and, you know, being with them as well though. So, you know, it's a lot of times, you know, God can give it, and he could take it away. You know, that's the main thing. Like, that's what I learned when I was very, very young. My mother always said that though. God, whatever God give, he could take it away. Just like that. He can take it away just like that though. And especially if we're not being upright, and especially if we're not being good stewards over ourselves and over the people around us, over the people that we're supposed to be praying for, over the ones that we covering, over the ones that we shepherding, over our houses, over our cars, over our bodies, our temples, you know, everything though. So, you know, you never know. You know, we never know when our time is though, but you know, but while we're here and while we do have that time, man, like our job is to just never waver. Like we can't waver, and you know, or we can't stay wavering. Like I said, we're gonna sway. You know, we're gonna sway here and there. You know, the trees and bushes sway when the wind's coming. You know, sometimes our cars is feeling that wind on the highways and the bridges though, when the wind is just, you know, rolling and just whistling. We feel that swaying when there's something going on with when our alignment is off in our cars, and you know, we can even feel it, you know, physically, spiritually, and mentally with our bodies though. If we just misaligned somewhere or somehow, we're gonna sway, man. We're gonna waver. You know, we're gonna tilt, and we're gonna tilt, and we're gonna rock, and we're gonna rock, and we're gonna rock. But you know, but the good thing about it though is that we can't stay in that rocking motion. We can't stay in that wavering motion. We cannot stay in that way to where, you know, we're just going back and forth and side to side and back and forth and up and down and all that though. So, you know, that's why it's very, very important to have faith when it counts. And not only when we're, like I said, not only when we're at rock bottom, not only when it's dark and when things is dim, it's when we're happy. It's when things is smooth. You know, we forget to pray. We forget to pray. We forget to show grace to God, man, and love to God, even when stuff is going right. When it's going right, everybody's cool, you know, and everybody's chilling. You know, everybody's chilling in the promised land. You know, reaping the benefits, man, and you know, enjoying the milk and honey, and you know, the steaks and shrimps, and you know, carrot cupcakes and chocolate Tootsie Rolls. You know, so you know, it's all fun and games. You know, it's all fun and games when everything's going good though. You know, just like we say in the hood, man, like, you know, it was all good just a week ago. You know, it was all good just 2 weeks ago, man. It was all good just yesterday. You know, when we was all chilling, having fun, man, talking, chirping it up. And now, you know, we faced with the opposition. Then, you know, where we at? You know, where's that love? Where's that generosity? Where's that patience? Where's that compassion at? Where's that trust? I thought we was game. You know, I thought we was ride or die, man. I thought we was in this. You know what I mean? I thought. You know, so, you know, and even when we thinking like that, you know, the enemy would still come in and still make us feel like we're not doing our part. And, you know, we really, and then we're really like, you know, not doing something right, because, you know, that's what the enemy wants us to do, man. He wants us to think like that. So, you know, when we're wavering, men, you know, when we're wavering side to side, man, and when we're not standing firm, and when we feeling like that, our word is in our you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Our initiative is not being reciprocated and not being understood and not being reached, and you know, we still can't waver. You know, we still can't waver though. We still can't waver. We still gotta go to God, man. We still gotta trust God, because as long as we're doing what we need to do and making them steps and making them strides, man, like, you know, God's gonna see that though, man. I said time and time again, man. You know, we're not always gonna move on everybody else's time. You know, we're just not gonna move on everybody else's time. When everybody's time is implicating you to move on their time, then, you know, sometimes you just gotta probably reevaluate their motive or their initiative, you know, because, you know, like I said earlier, you don't want to keep on putting 2 feet, you know, in front of one and taking 2 steps back and 10 steps back because you're trying to appease everybody else. So, you know, not everybody's really going to understand your walk, whether if you know, dealing with life situations, whether if you're in a sinful nature, whether if you're dealing with your attitude, whether if you're just dealing with everyday life, trust issues, bitterness, unforgiveness, whatever, you know, but at least you know that you're doing everything that you can, you know, to allow God to transform you and elevate your mind in those things that you're lacking and then that you need to, you know, work on in life though. So, you know, like I said, man, a lot of people's not going to understand that though. You know what I mean? They're just not going to understand that. A lot of people's going to look at it like, you know, you wasting their time, or, you know, you should already been up here. You should already done arrived one way or another, though. When, man, this is a process. You know, it's 40 years though. Like I said, 40 years for me. 40 years for me, and I'll be 43. So 3 years later, after 40, I was already going around the mountain for 40 years though. 40 years, and I'm still managed to be here though. I'm still a testimony, no matter what. Still a testimony, no matter what though. And 40 years, look whose time I'm on right now. I'm on God's time, on my time, using this time to do something for him. You know, because it was his time. I thought about it, I prayed about it, and, you know, it happened on his time. I could have been doing these videos and everything else maybe like last year, 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, maybe 5, 6, 7, I don't know, when I first even thought about it. But did I? Nah, because I wasn't prepared though. I wasn't prepared. So in my mind, I was going around the mountain with that situation because I wanted to make sure it was the right time. It was on God's time, you know. So, you know, and like I said, that's just with life in general. That's with anything in general, you know. A lot of people still saying, well, why don't you go get a room? Why don't you go get a room? It's like, listen, man, if y'all really know, if y'all really understand, I've been living in rooms all my life. You know, I wasn't, not all my life though, but, you know, when I was younger, that's what I did. I lived in rooms. I lived in crack houses with my mother. We stayed in rooms. You know, we stayed in rooms. When we was in a shelter, we stayed in a room. We lived in a room. You know, when I was at the men's mission, I was basically just living in a room. You know, right now I'm basically still in my car. You know, this is like a mobile home / room / apartment / everything though. So, you know, I'm getting tired of it. You know, I'm getting sick of it. You know, I'm getting sick of it though. So I'm getting sick of living in the room. I'm getting sick of living in the shelter room. I'm getting sick of living in, you know, a room in the house. I'm sick of it. I don't even want to rent a room. I don't even want to rent a room from nobody else's house. I want to be able to rent a place, or apartment, or a house, so I could be in my room and come in and out of the room. You know, so, you know, once again, and I'm not, and like I said, I don't be rude to nobody. Just, yeah, you know, I hear y'all, but I got children. You know, I got children though, so, and you know, it's about time, and you know, like I said, my back's been hurting. You know, just still trying to adjust as much as I can. I'm standing up, clapping, worshiping, doing what doing what I'm supposed to be doing what I need to be doing what the Spirit is telling me to do, praising God though. And I'm clapping, man, and my back is killing me, man. It's getting stiff. I'm like, yo, I don't even want to stand up no more. You know what I mean? So I'm like, yo, my back is like killing me, stiff, and it's just hurting though. So, and even at work when I was walking around doing my tours, like, killing me, just so tough to walk up the steps, man. I put pressure on my feet. I feel it right up in the back though. And even at my other job, walking out here and, you know, out here in the community and doing this and doing that, like, yo, back is killing me though. So yeah, I'm getting tired of that room stuff. I'm getting tired of people's couches, man. I'm getting tired of, you know, I'm getting tired of cots, man. I'm getting tired of all that, man. I'm getting tired of making cots on the floor, man. Like, you know, it's about time. You know, it's about time, man. You know, the more I keep on trusting God, man, and having that faith when it really counts, like, you know, God's going to bless me with that place. He's going to bless me with that apartment, though. He's going to bless me with that house, whatever it is. And I got to be able to move in that, and I got to be able to hold that down as well, though. So, you know, yeah, you know, so, you know, once again, you know, just a little quick video, man. 38 minutes I've been on here. 3:11, still 43 degrees out this piece, man. March 1st, 2026. Chilling over here in Sheets, man. Looking good, smelling good as usual, man. What a glorious Sunday. Looking forward to spring. You know, looking forward to spring, though. You know, we're here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and, you know, take it from there, though. So, you know, those who's keeping me uplifted in prayers, man, I appreciate it. Those who still watching, man. Those who still subscribing, man, appreciate it. You know, once again, I say it all the time, man. My cats over there in Germany, Japan, all across the world, man, whoever's watching. Hey, you know, keep it 100, man. I appreciate it. Still at 17 subscribers, though, which is cool. I can't complain, man. That's still a milestone. You know, I definitely peeped that. I definitely embraced that, though. So, you know, I was also able to talk to one of my childhood friends that I went to school with, man. We go way back, man. My man Ray, you know what I mean? Like, we go way back, man, way back. So it was good to see him, you know, working and striving yesterday when I went up to, you know, to one of these you know, one of these clothing stores or whatever though. So, you know, we was talking and, you know, just catching up a little bit. So, you know, I gave him a link to, you know, you know, one of the jobs that I'm working in on a late night. And, you know, so he said he's going to check out the videos and all that, subscribe, man, which is cool, which is smooth though. So Ray, you know what I mean? If you watching, man, I appreciate it, man. We go way back, like 4 Cadillacs in a flat, man. Like, you know, real rap, man. You know what I mean? Since 6th grade, man, since we was going to the zoo at House 5, man. You know what I mean? You already know our dialect, man. Every time we see each other, man, we sweatpants, rust, cars, tires, sneakers. We just be saying anything, man, and everybody be looking at us like, yo, what is they doing? But, you know, that's that's basically an inside joke. You know, that's an inside joke when we say that. And so real quick, so what's behind that inside joke? We was in class in 6th grade, and one of our other homies though, you know, was in our classroom, and he had on some gray sweatpants, and in the back of the sweatpants, it was brown. Now, it didn't smell like, you know, it ain't smell like nothing though, but it was brown. I don't know what it was, but it was a stain of something brown. And so me and Ray's looking like, yo, you think my man had an accident or something? I'm like, nah, I don't know. And I was like, yo, so what does that look like? He was like, I don't know, man. It looked like chocolate or something though. He asked me, he was like, you know, mine, like, what does that look like? I said, I don't know, rust. And I said, yo, don't it look like rust? And then he was like, yeah, it looked like rust. And then ever since then, we just, you know, we just say stuff like that. You know, we just come in, you know, we just came into school, man. Every single time we see each other, we just be like, rust, milk duds. You know what I mean? Just crazy stuff though. But like I said, you know, that's our inside thing. We really didn't get that dialect yesterday though. I mean, he was working, he was doing his thing, and I was trying to get in and get out of the store though. But, you know, once again, you know, like I said, man, if my man Ray's watching, man, like we go way back, man. You know what I mean? Even though he a Cowboys fan, we do agree that Emmett is not better than Barry. And we had that discussion back in 6th grade though. So my man Ray, you know what I mean? We you know, yeah, we was maintaining back in the day, man. He know how to draw too. So a couple things that I draw, couple things that I still draw, I actually learned from him. I mean, he could draw, you know, man. His face be all close to the paper like that. And he be drawing though, just out of nowhere, he just be drawing. And so, you know, like I said, my man Ray, man, it was definitely good seeing him, man, and good talking with him as well though. So, you know, once again, just want to encourage you guys. I'm gonna read this over again and then take it from there. And then, you know, looking forward to come out here and you know, racking up some more turkeys and some more wins, you know, beating my children over here in bowling over here on Locust Lane though. So let me read this again. Faith when it really counts. Do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. And that's Numbers 14:9. Joshua and Caleb were the only 2 men over 40 years old who were allowed to enter the promised land. After 40 years in the wilderness, these men faced the monumental task of taking the land God had promised to the Israelites. The faith in God was all-encompassing, as if their lives depend on a kind of faith. Why? Because their lives actually did depend on God's promise. If Joshua was to lead Israel into the land, he would have had to feel God's presence on a moment-by-moment basis and step out in faith, trusting that God could come through for him. Joshua's job as a leader of Israel was to encourage the people to attack fortified cities in the face of overwhelming odds. Through 40 years, his confidence in God's strong arm had not wavered, and God rewarded his faith. Let Joshua's story of determined, consistent belief encourage you today. God, please help me have faith and courage like Joshua, to believe that you are with me and will keep all your promises. In Jesus' name, my Lord and Savior's name, I pray. Hey, appreciate it, man. Once again, you guys, man, I love you guys. You know, still stay up, man. Still stay shining, man. You know, still maintaining, man. You know, still do what y'all need to do. You know, stay hustling in that work week, man. Keep your faith up. Keep your trust in God up, man. And, you know, don't waver, man. Don't waver. Don't stay in that waver moment. Stay firm. Stay firm in that foundation. Continue to be planting, you know, seeds in that good soil, man. You know, men, continue to be there for your children, man. Continue to be there for your children. Continue to be there for your children. No matter what, continue to be there for your children, man. You know, it's tough out here and it's rough, but we got to have that faith, man. We still got to trust in God, man. Just as well as Joshua did. You know, he had to go over there and, you know, still lead the Israelites. It's the same thing we got to do in our households, and it's the same thing we got to do as fathers and men. That's what we got to do as leaders of the church, leaders in our positions, as mentors, as coaches, you know, as bishops, as reverends, as motivational speakers, as athletes, as everything that we do is basically a spotlight on us just because we're men. See what I'm saying? And Satan always wants to take out the men because we are, man. We strong, man. We hold that though. So, you know, once again, man, you know, just want to encourage you guys, man. You know, like I said, man, just want to encourage you guys. You know, it's March 1st, 2026, man. 3:18 right now, 43 degrees out here in beautiful Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It's sunny. I'm chilling over here at Sheets, man. Looking good, smelling good. Still maintaining, still doing what I'm doing. Keep me in prayers as far as the crib. I'll keep you guys updated. It's going to be a glorious time, though. So, it's going to be a glorious time when I get it. And, you know, you guys going to walk with me, though. So, appreciate it, man. Keep God first, man. Keep your faith in Christ Jesus, man. And hey, we can all be in we can all go to the promised land and, you know, experience that milk and honey, man. Appreciate it, y'all. God bless, man.